Hello, I hope you are well, and thank you for coming and joining me for this live. It's always a lot of fun for me to do these lives. I really enjoy hearing from you and getting your comments and seeing the things that you ask and the things that are important to you as well, because I think it only helps to make the whole experience for all of us that much richer, that much better. And I hope that it helps to steer what I say to make it as useful as possible. Now, before I sort of talk about this whole idea of how you improve your language, it's quite a big topic. It sounds very big, and I know it's very big, but I'm going to sort of focus it in a little bit. But the reason why I wanted to sort of get your input and your feedback on this is because I've been doing this Estonian challenge since the start of the month, and I will continue until the end of this month, learning Estonian pretty much full time, really. I'm doing like 3-4 hours of study a day and then using the Speakly app, and it's going well. And I do these sort of thoughts of the day at the end of every day, and I sort of give either a tip or a trick or something that I use and that I'm conscious that I'm using or think about or to do with the app itself that I find useful. And I sort of say that at the end of the day. And I've seen a couple of comments where people say, well, okay, I think we need an actual, there was one comment yesterday in particular that said, we need a sort of over-the-shoulder view of how you're understanding Estonian and how you're going about it. And what I've been trying to do is share as much as I possibly can to sort of be as transparent as possible with what I'm doing, how I'm doing it. But I kind of get that sometimes my version of what I think is what you want may not be 100% what you want. And so this is really an invitation for you to tell me the kinds of questions you have, the kinds of things that are not clear, the kinds of things that I can address, the kinds of things that you would like me to answer. And so that this is really about you and your learning, as well as sort of me analyzing what I do and giving it back to you. That's kind of what I want to do here, and that's the idea of this channel, and that's the idea of the whole, being a community and supporting each other. I think that for me, it's the most important thing is that there's something useful for as many people as possible here as possible, that sort of I can make this as useful as possible for as many people as possible. So I'm very, very open to you leaving comments, asking questions. So feel free to do that on any of my videos or on any of my posts, and I will look at them and I will take them into account when I'm saying things or putting things together. Now, in order to sort of talk about today, there's kind of a bit of a reason why I chose this. I think part of it is I'm going through this whole process right now of learning Estonian, and I'm doing it very quickly. And it's really strange because I've gone from not really being able to say anything except for hello and thank you, and possibly that's about, oh, I don't speak Estonian, maybe I could say in the beginning when I started Estonian. I couldn't really remember anything about the language. And I had done some Finnish before, so some words were recognizable. And I've also studied German, so there are a lot of German words in Estonian, especially for things around the house and some basic stuff. That there are definitely some German words that help. But otherwise, really, it was pretty much starter language for me. I studied sort of how the language generally worked as more of a theoretical thing, I guess. And it was many, many years ago. And going through it, so it's been 3 weeks now. This is kind of my fourth and final week of studying Estonian intensively on Speakly. And what struck me is that I've got to this stage with it where I definitely feel like I can say an awful lot of things about me, about my life, about my family, about my friends, about what I like doing, what I don't like doing, what I want to eat, where I want to go, talking about my plans, talking about a whole host of things, right? And I've sort of got, I realized that this is kind of this level that you get to in a language where you feel like you can say quite a lot of stuff, and you feel quite comfortable. And I can kind of get when you get that feeling of, right, I'm flying now, I'm going forward with this language. Then in reality, you look back on it and you think, well, actually, a lot of it is with mistakes. It's not perfect, which isn't the end of the world. But then you also realize, actually, there are quite a lot of things I can't say. And I think that that is the issue that many of us have. Whether it's with the first, second, third, or whatever language we're talking about, I've been through this process so many times now with languages where I've studied them, and I've studied some to a very high level, some to kind of lower levels, depending on what I need them for. And sometimes I'm actually quite happy with the type of level I have now in Estonian. For many languages would actually be perfectly fine for what I'd need. For as a tourist, for example, I think I could land in Estonia tomorrow and be able to get around and speak in Estonian and sort of do my business and get a lot out of that experience. Would it be perfect? No. Would I understand everything? Probably not. But would I understand enough, and would I be able to say enough for it to make sense? Yes, absolutely. And I'll make a sort of a video at the end of the 4 weeks to sort of give a nice overview of how I feel about the level that I'm at, what I would consider that level to be, how it's been working with Speakly, and that's kind of a separate thing for me. But I wanted to sort of talk about this level that we're sort of talking about now, where you do feel that you can go and you can use the language to a degree. And I've certainly had that with a number of languages for years. Greek, for example, was a language I had at that kind of level. It's around about an A2, B1 level, roughly. I'm not saying that's where I am with Estonian, don't get me wrong, but with Greek, it was always kind of like this A2, B1 level for many, many years. And it was actually completely fine. I could go to Greece. I didn't need to use English pretty much, because all I was asking for were kind of directions, when are things open, when are things closed, how much does something cost, where can I find this, where can I find that, what do I want to eat, reading the menu, talking generally about things in my life. If someone got me into a little bit of a conversation, I could hold a bit of a conversation. And so there's that level where it's kind of this A2, B1-ish level. And with an A2, if you know all of the vocabulary and the grammar at A2, you know quite a lot, because you already know how to talk about events in the past, events in the present, and events in the future, as well as, a vocabulary of potentially active vocabulary of around about 1,200 words, and passively you may know a few more hundred even. It's not kind of a small number of words, and it's nothing to be sneezed at in terms of what you can do at A2. And that level really was absolutely fine for me for years and years. And where I think the difficulty comes is when you have that level and you can say things and you can interact with somebody, because it is enough for a lot of things. Often it's very difficult to push past it. And some people, I think this is what many people think about when they think of this intermediate plateau. For me, I don't know if that plateau really exists. I think it's a constant pushing of words and vocabulary. And in one of the one of the latest videos I made, sort of at the end of the day, my thoughts was about words that you want to know. And this is the key, right? It gets to a point where you can understand and use what you need to use. But if you want to push it further forwards, you have to actually do something actively. And I think this is where the big change is, right? So when you start learning a language, you learn about sort of these sort of islands of ideas. So sort of one island could be talking about myself, talking about what I do, where I'm from, who I am, my family. Another one might be going in more detail. Another island could be talking more about the family, the relationships, etc., etc. Another one could be about talking about your work and what you do. Another island could be talking about the weather. Another island could be talking about I don't know, the time, or directions could be another island. And all of these islands, what happens is this is kind of sort of the A1 building blocks that get you to this A2 when you start connecting things together. And that's that kind of idea of you start connecting them, you build bridges between the islands, and you can run between the islands during a conversation and put them all together in a package, and that works. Now, when it gets to things that are kind of off those islands of the sort of the base things that you talk about, when you're sort of talking about the kind of the B1 and above levels, you're talking about topics like sort of talking about military service, talking about the environment, talking about sort of maybe theatre and film, talking about, you know, types of ecology, types of buildings, and it could be all sorts of things that you learn about at B1 level. But the thing is that the vocabulary that you learn at those levels, B1, B2, and further, it's the type of vocabulary that as a tourist and as somebody just having a general chit-chat conversation with somebody, you're not going to use. So this is where the difficulty comes in, because you have to then decide what you're going to do, and it has to be deliberate. It has to be active. So I got some really good ideas from people who answered to the question on Instagram, and you know, some of you put some really good ideas in there. And there are things that you can do, looking at the news, keeping up with the news, and then talking about it with somebody, so that you don't just listen to and passively understand that vocabulary, you actively use it. You could do that as a journal, you could do that as, you could write it as well, you can do whatever you want with it. But it's going out of your way to do something that isn't just having a bit of a chit chat with somebody. The chit chat with somebody, you will slowly learn more and more words. Unfortunately, it's a very slow process. And because you can say what you want to say and get by, and you know, the sort of the hi, how are you type thing, and it will take you so far. And this is the thing, is people can even live in a country for up to 20, 30, 40 years or more, their whole lives, and they can stay at this A2 to B1 level where they just get by on what they need, and that's fine. But if you want to move forward, and I'm guessing that if you're watching this video, it's one of your goals is to go forward, then you have to make more of an effort. And the reason you do is because you have to take yourself out of the comfort zone, out of the zone of, you know, staying within the parameters of these easy to manage conversations with the vocabulary that you already have. And you have to move out of those and get into this sort of mind space of, I want to be able to talk about a war that's happening somewhere, a famine. I want to talk about the weather. I want to talk about the environment. I want to talk about animal welfare. I want to talk about whatever it is you want to talk about. Start with each one and treat each topic as an island. Okay, treat each topic as an island. You can go online and you can find podcasts, you can find blogs, you can find news stories, you can find other people from those countries where their languages are spoken who are interested in these groups. Find groups to do with these in the countries and read about what they're doing. Getting comprehensible input from those groups and from those sources is really key to building up your vocabulary. Then take it that step further. Don't keep it passive, make it active. So take that vocabulary and start using it yourself. Find a language partner or use a teacher or whatever sort of means you have to see if you can get corrections. Write things about the topic. See if you can get corrections on what you're writing. Because once you can start expressing your opinions, when you talk to somebody else and you bring up that topic, you can always turn the conversation and talk about it and ask people. And then you get your practice, because without practice and without repeating things over and over again, actually you can't develop your thoughts, ideas, or what you want to say, your feelings and emotions in the new language. And that's really where we want to get to. Language learning is, I think, as I've said a few times, it's a process of learning something to the point that it becomes automatic. And that goes with all of these topics, that you don't have to think 5 seconds, and you know these words are to do with what you want to say, and you know the kinds of things you want to say. We almost do this in sort of, even if we only have one language, we do this. People will have sort of phrases and things that they like to say because that's what they think. And I think these types of things we need to do in the other languages we're learning, so that we get to know what it is and how we need to say it. And I think that if you start seeing these islands of subjects further out from the sort of the A2 islands that I was describing, from A1 to A2, and you start building out these B1, B2, and further islands, you start to be able to make bridges between these and take the conversations a little bit further out. So maybe talking about what's happening in the news, what's happening in the newspaper, something you last read. What do you think of this situation? What do you think of that situation? And as you get into conversations with people, they will start bringing in their own vocabulary, their own thoughts. And you can ask for clarification with the base information and knowledge that you already have, because you can do it. If it's written, you can obviously look it up and you can check it out and you can learn. But if it's oral, you can always ask and people can explain it to you. This is really in the natural way how things go. And this is why I also don't really believe in this intermediate plateau. I think that it's more a case of you are working on these different islands of knowledge. And until you've got so many of them where you can just go backwards and forwards in a very fluid manner, it really does start to ramp up. And before you know it, people perceive you as this very advanced speaker of the language. When you do get to the more advanced levels, then you're starting to build in more and more colloquialisms, understanding differences between different types of dialects, or playing with the language. It could be slang, it could be idioms, for example, that you might want to pop an idiom in there to make it feel a bit more sort of authentic. So, instead of saying, let me think. Instead of saying somebody is naive, you could say they're green, for example, in English. So green is associated with naivety in English. But you may have these types of things in different languages. So green, for example, as being naive is something that occurs in other languages. And so you can actually start to make these links, even with idioms and turns of phrase in different languages. You can start to do that too. And that will take you even further beyond the islands and sort of enrich and embellish the types of things that you say. These are the things that I do. I hope describing it in this way has made that process a little bit clearer. I would be very interested to read your thoughts on, is there something I can sort of dive a bit deeper on and explain a little bit better and maybe go into a bit more detail? I'd be very, very happy to do that. I think really just in general terms, that's what I would do. And I hope that if you follow that sort of advice, you will also start to see that you build up your expertise in certain areas slowly but surely. And if you start seeing them as areas of expertise, you can almost feel like you're leveling up each time. Like in the sort of the gamification that many people seem to crave nowadays in sort of language learning, where you finish one area and you get a badge for it. Well, it is a bit like that in your mind. I mean, when you can talk about a topic really easily, that's kind of what it's like. And I know for sure that I've gone through phases like that with languages where, I feel very, very comfortable talking about certain topics that in the beginning I had no idea, how I would even attempt, talking about them. And it's amazing. I mean, it's sometimes you get this with experience, with sometimes there are certain things that you will only get when you make yourself go into these situations to talk about them, to be exposed to the vocabulary and the grammar and all that stuff. So there we go. So that's enough from me for now. I think that probably that's enough from me, and I will have a look at some of the questions that you have kindly written in. Let me see if I get them all. If I miss anything, please do let me know. Feel free to write and tell me. Let me see. So thank you all for your kind hellos and everything. That felt very nice of you. Yeah, it's nice to know when you say, sort of for me, when you say you speak a language, I think that this A2 level is generally, you can say you can communicate in a language. I mean, if you can communicate ideas and basic stuff, I mean, are you speaking a language? For me, I think it's fair enough to say that you speak. You may not speak it particularly well, but you can still speak it, right? I always am a little bit concerned when I see people poo-poo this A2 level as not being very much of anything. It actually took a lot of time for me to get to that level in some languages. It really did. Okay, like going to a bar with foreign friends, yeah, and discuss about environment, yeah. Educational systems, yeah, you can't really, yeah, I mean, there are going to be, okay, you're going to need to pick your times when you do this, right? So yeah, there are going to be certain occasions where you're not going to want to be talking about really heavy stuff, but there are certainly going to be times where you do and you can, and some countries are more open to this. So for example, in the Balkans, if you start talking about politics, it's a very common thing to talk about, and people just sort of talk about it, and they can get a bit excited about it, but it's not like in in some countries where it can be a really taboo thing. You've got to get to know the country as well, and the language and the people, and what they're happy and comfortable talking about. Also there are certain topics that will be taboo in one country and not in another. So pick your pick your topics wisely. I would say for sensitive topics, it's probably good to have a safe space to do that in. So using a teacher or a language exchange or something like that, I think is probably the most useful way to do that, so that you don't feel threatened and they don't feel threatened, or they don't feel, particularly if you meet someone on the street and you start talking about religion, sexuality, topics like that, I think, depending on the country, can create reactions, especially if you're at a level where you're learning how to express your thoughts on those topics. You're not sort of already aware of them. If you're learning how to express your thoughts, it's probably a safer stomping ground to talk to a teacher or talk to a friend or somebody who knows you, or a language partner. And the reason I say that is because when we're talking about certain things as well, sensitive topics particularly, for you it's a word, and it's just a word that's a translation of a word. For those people who speak it and grew up speaking that language, and grew up in a specific culture or society, often those words can have a lot of cultural baggage with them. And so it's always a good idea to explore that baggage in a safe environment. Definitely. Because sometimes you can, with language can be quite powerful. I mean, you can end up pushing a button with people if you say a word that just triggers them. I mean, I know we use this word triggers in English, but and it's kind of a new thing, and it's used as this, certain topics trigger people, but actually language does have that power to, especially if people have had bad experience with certain things. As soon as you say a word, especially certain topics as well, certain topics are very emotive. What do you think of military service? These are the kinds of topics that arise, and they can have some quite powerful reactions when you talk about them. Talking about war, talking about these kinds of things, these are emotive topics. We're not talking about sort of, do you like skiing? Oh no. These are topics that mean things to people, and mean things to people in a way that they may have had bad experience with them, or been affected negatively or extremely positively. Depends. So yeah, we had a little chat. Okay. In the news, okay, she found the option to make transcripts available. Okay, so languages are on. Oh wow, that's pretty cool. So you got transcripts available for Falling. I can't read the name. Sorry, from Lingalese. Sorry, I can't read the name of the language there. I think it's because it's a bit small on my phone, and also the background sometimes with my beard. The the top. It unfortunately, I'm trying to move so that I can see because it kind of gets in the way. Thank you for sharing. You're very welcome. You love idioms. Yeah, I love idioms too. They can be really cute. They can really, sometimes when you hear them, you're like, okay, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Yeah, thank you for joining. It's nice to see you too. Okay, I'm glad you like the metaphor of the islands. I think the islands are quite handy to have as a metaphor. I've used this on a few presentations before, and I just find that idea of, you do have topics, and when you move from one topic to another, you do move kind of from island to island of topics of conversation. Sometimes you stay on an island for a while and you explore. Particularly if in the UK, the island of weather vocabulary, you could stay on for maybe a week. People like to talk about things like that, and they go into a lot of detail. So you can kind of have a superficial talk about the weather. It's sunny, it's hot, it's rainy, it's cold, and then you could start talking about kind of, there's drizzle, it's hazy, it's, this morning it was foggy, it was that fine rain that came down and it soaked me right through. Sounds like I need to create a language app. I mean, there are quite a few of them out there. I don't know if I would be able to add anything more to them, to be honest. Speakly's doing pretty well for me so far. I've got to be fair to it. You can't believe that all that's to do with moving from intermediate to advanced is just about moving from island to island. Let me give you an idea. So, right, on the islands, okay, when you first start an island, I'll sort of develop this a little bit further for you so you can see what I mean. So you develop an island, right? And even the island on family, okay, your basic plants that will go on the island, the basic trees that you will plant for the family island, may be mother, father, sister, brother, maybe wife, husband, partner, maybe children, maybe those, right? And that's it. Now, as you move forward, I would definitely never advise anyone to learn every member of the family until a bit later, especially if you don't have those family members, okay? Focus on the family members you have. This is your A1, A2, your safe place, right? There's no point learning the word for father-in-law if you don't have a father-in-law straight away, because you're not going to use it. And you're possibly going to keep forgetting it and not recognizing it. If you're somebody you know very close to you speaks the language and they do have a father-in-law and they mention your father-in-law all the time, it may automatically become one of the words that you learn. Now, as time goes on, for example, languages like Swedish, quite easy with this when it comes to brothers, sisters, aunties, uncles, grandparents, because they just go more, more, and more. So more is mother, more and more. Two mothers are grandmother on the mother's side. Far more, father's mother is your grandmother on your father's side, etc., etc. And this sort of expands out quite easily in Swedish, so that helps. But in some languages, like for example, my home language of Macedonian, we have many different words for the types of relationships between the brothers and sisters of married couples. So for example, if my wife has a brother, then her brother is my shura, and I am his zet. So we have two words just for that relationship. And so they were the first ones I learned. Then there's also bajanak. Bajanak is the relationship of when two sisters are married, their husbands are bajanats. So bajanak, okay? So that's that word. And because I don't have, my wife doesn't have a sister, so I don't have a bajanak, so I don't need to know that word. And I didn't need to learn it until much later. So yes, it's kind of true that you do each island and you expand out and you learn lots of different vocabulary pieces, but you also go back to the islands and you develop and plant more trees, you plant more words, you add more to it, you add more detail to it. You can add idioms into it. So when you're talking about going from this, what they call the intermediate sort of stage of this B1-ish, maybe start of B2-ish level, to the more advanced stages of the high B2, C1, C2, what you're really talking about is adding on a lot of these kinds of turns of phrase, a lot more of them, and for them to become very automatic, for you to get these kinds of references, for you to add in the sort of the dialectal changes and things like that. So you go back to the islands that you've developed, is what I'm saying, and you start to see a growth on each island, and that's how you get to this more advanced stage. It's not just you build more islands, you actually have to you're going back all the time, and this naturally happens, actually. I mean, once you start building more islands, this naturally starts to happen. But what you do need to do is make an effort to use the language. So that's why I say talking about things purposefully, actively, is really important. If there are certain words that you want to learn, knowing what words you want to learn and actually giving yourself a goal of using them in a conversation. And you do that over and over and over again until you've got this huge vocabulary that's sort of behind you, and you can call on and understand way more stuff. I hope that kind of helps to give a better understanding of where I'm coming from with this. It is quite complicated. It's not just adding more and more islands. It's also improving on the foliage and on the greenery that you have on each island. Okay. Language Group, you had a nice chat about gamification in Italian this month. Yeah, that's really nice. Having chats in sort of groups, clubs, using places like using places like Clubhouse, using places on, people use different apps, whether it's WeChat, whether it's Zoom groups, whatever it is, use different groups, right? I know on the Polyglot conference, we've still got, the site is still up from last year's conference, and there are still people who are organized from the forum. They go from the forum, they go back into the live environment, and they meet up and have German exchanges, and they do different language exchanges, and it's a really cool way to do it, because if you use these kinds of technologies to meet with groups of people regularly, you get to talk about whatever you want. And if it doesn't exist, make it happen. This is the cool thing. Okay, let me see. I'm just going to check on here on YouTube. I think I may have missed a couple of comments on here. Sorry about this. Let me see. Do you still mind if I ask a question in 4 different languages? You can have a go. ¿Por qué decidiste aprender español con acento andaluz? No decidí hablar español así. Es que viví con malagueño en Francia. Y así que pega más el acento andaluz. Y por eso. Pero no, es que no elegí hablar así. Es que no. Pero me gusta, ¿por qué no? ¿Qué te hizo elegir? No, sí. Así que, Richard, I think I already told you that I'm going to do a 30-day Italian challenge. Fantastic, Lucas. I'm glad that doing this has actually inspired. I've seen a few of you say to me, that you fancied doing a language challenge because I've been doing this Estonian one. It's been a lot of fun. I mean, I'm going to do a full appraisal of it at the end. I can't say that doing a full-time challenge for an entire month is the easiest thing to do. It's pretty hard on the brain. My head at the end of the day very often feels like it's spinning, and with all of the words, and it does get a little bit crazy. And sometimes I find also, it can be a bit confusing to do so many words in a day. But as I say, I'll talk about this in more detail next week, and you can see my full thoughts on learning 40 words a day in Estonian for a month. Do you feel a shift in your personality as you switch from one language to another? No, I don't. I don't get this at all. I don't feel like a different person when I speak a different language. I am the same person. In fact, trying to get rid of my British sense of humor is extremely difficult. It's one of the things that I have to keep watching. The only thing I will say is I don't change myself, but perceptions of me will be different from one culture to another because the way I act and my sense of humor, my natural sense of humor, will be viewed differently through different cultural lenses. But I myself am the same person in all of the languages. I don't change. Okay. Bavakasha, Nimrod, Bavakasha. Ok. Penses-tu que la façon de parler d'un locuteur dépend aussi à son milieu d'origine? Oui, ça dépend, bien sûr. Ouais. En fait, quand tu parles, par exemple à Liverpool, par exemple, en ce qui concerne ma famille, par exemple, comme ils parlent, et les gens à Londres, ils disent des choses différentes. Je crois que c'est normal partout, en fait, avec les dialectes et l'argot, le vocabulaire qu'on utilise, ça change euh, de région en région, quoi. Donc, oui, ça c'est clair. I focus too much on writing and listening, and I struggle with speaking. Rob, I don't know if it depends on what motivates you, right, and why you're learning a language. So I always find the word too much a difficult one to agree to. I think that there's no such thing as too much if that's the thing you want to do. So if speaking isn't something you feel comfortable or interested in, then it's not too much. If you are interested in speaking, then it's a case of getting yourself out of your comfort zone and adding more of that to it. And the way to do it is kind of, as I sort of talked about, I did this sort of initial session in Estonian where I showed you where I sort of start with a lesson. So I have my notes from what I've been learning for the week. I read through the language that I have. That took me on that lesson, that italki lesson, took me half an hour just to go through my notes with my teacher. It takes me around that every day to go through what I've been learning with my teacher, and then trying to manipulate that language to say things that are relevant to me. And that probably takes me another half an hour. But it's going through things. And I think if you go through that in that way, Rob, you'll find that you feel comfortable and confident because the words and the grammar and the structures are already there when you're reading them out. And because you're reading them out and you're getting help with the pronunciation or whatever, then when it comes to making your own stuff, then it feels easier, if that makes sense. I think that that's probably a good way to start anyway, especially if you're thinking that this is difficult. Was denkst du drüber? Okay, über Rap anzuhören. Ja, also Rapmusik habe ich ja schon auf mehreren Sprachen auch gehört. Und ja, auf Deutsch ist es ziemlich cool eigentlich. Es kommt darauf an, welche Sprache das ist. Einige Sprachen eigentlich ist Rap ja nicht so toll, aber auf Deutsch ist halt ziemlich gut. Aber ich höre ja alles. Ich meine, es gibt ja ein Lied auf Deutsch. Es ist, wie war das jetzt? MFG, mit freundlichen Grüßen. Und das war ja toll. Das ist klasse, wirklich. Das kannst du auf YouTube finden. Hey, Carlos, good to see you. Greetings from Spain. I'm glad you agree with the intermediate plateau. Yeah, not really existing. John, I think Moses was the master of A1, A2. So much enjoyment. There's absolutely a lot of enjoyment to be had at A1, A2 level. And I get why people study languages and study multiple languages at kind of an A1, A2 level, because you feel that rush of starting to communicate. and getting your point across. And you can get your point across to quite a larger degree than I think people give you credit. At A1, well, the A2 level particularly. A1's a little bit more tricky, but it's a little bit tricky there. But yeah, the A2 level for sure. You can do a lot more than people often give credit for that level. And yeah, you see, I totally got why Moses did that. I thought it was quite an impressive thing to have done in so many languages as well. So I think we've all got our own journeys and our own paths, right? We're not all on the same path. So some people say that they want to focus on like getting to C1, C2 level in every single language, otherwise they won't bother. That's fine too. Look, I mean, it's not like it's necessarily someone's job. It's an enjoyment. It's a hobby. It's a fun thing to do. And sometimes some people will go for one or two languages to a higher level, and then they'll want to just play around with others, or they may not. They may just want to read books and literature in these one or two languages that they studied, and that's fine too. There's no right or wrong, and no one comes around with handing out medals to you all, at the end. The medal is the knowledge that you wanted and attaining it. That's your reward for your studies. Nothing else. It's for you. It's not for anyone else. And I think, yeah, I mean, sometimes, yeah, we can think that on social media we get praise or whatever, but really, I mean, when the computer goes off, when the lights go out and you go to sleep, you're the one that has to live in your own mind and your own body and be happy with what you're doing. And I think that's being authentic to your true nature and desires of what you want to do. Do you want to read classical Persian literature and become an expert in Farsi, or do you want to do something completely different and study the indigenous languages of Southern Africa? I mean, whatever it is you want to do, there's no right or wrong with it. It's all positive and it all leads to a nice, fun experience and adventure. So go for what you want to do. I believe that you can learn about certain topics as a determined language. For example, it's easier to talk about guns and crime in English because of American TV shows. Okay, yeah, completely possible. Let me see. I love it. No intermediate plateau. I'll have to look and see what I've missed here, because this is a bold claim. Well, it's kind of a bold claim. I guess I put it into a bit more context. So yeah, do have a look and see what I said about it. I just don't think it's as clear cut as an intermediate plateau. Hopefully it's not that controversial. Would it be possible to work on a specific island, for example, phonetics and syntax, and call that language improvement? Absolutely. So some of the islands that we work on, for example, like there are some small islands that we work on in the very beginning and then we add to later, so we get corrections. So that can be to do with pronunciation and stuff, learning how to spell things. And I mean, if you think about it, when you learn a language, how often do you spell something and when do you need to start spelling things? For many people, it comes a little bit later. You don't learn to spell things straight away, because if you've got nothing to say, what are you going to spell apart from your name? And it doesn't sort of make much sense. But I think that there is a lot to be said for going back and adding things. De Brasil, eu admiro muito pela capacidade e disciplina da aprendizagem de idiomas. Parabéns. Obrigado. Muito obrigado, Alper. Muito obrigado. Vos tenés algunos consejos para el idioma ruso. Así que si funciona bien también con Speakly, creo que si funciona como lo que estoy haciendo este mes, porque tienen, así que puedes probar esto. La verdad es que funciona bastante bien para mí. A ver qué opinas. Pero sí, la cosa es que hay que hacer cosas sin pensar demasiado en la gramática, porque con el idioma como el idioma ruso, con todos los casos y tal y cual, será bastante difícil pensar y no saber 100% si está bien o no, y a veces sí que te duele la cabeza al final del día. Pero así, como dice la canción, ¿no? Despacito. Así que hay que hacerlo así. Um, kan je al de taal lezen? Ja, ik kan wel lezen. Ja, goed lezen weet ik helemaal niet. Ik heb eigenlijk niet geprobeerd, maar, ja, maar ik kan wel een beetje lezen, ja, natuurlijk. Maar ik heb alleen maar met Speakly geleerd. Dus even kijken dan naartoe. Ja. Ik wil graag nog meer doen, denk ik. Moet even ook een beetje meer lezen en luisteren en zo. Ja, even kijken, maar ik kom even terug dan aan die vraag, denk ik. Anger, let's see. Oops, Daisy. Okay. Do you think the retention of language is good when you do this intensive speed learning as when you study more normal speed? Or is it like cramming for an exam and then forgetting again? Inga, really good question. Really, really good question. And that is definitely something I want to go into a little bit at the end of this month. There is definitely a case of easy come, easy go with language generally, because you need to repeat it over a period of time for it to make sense. And this is why I would never say to somebody, okay, do what I'm doing now for Estonian. 40 words a day is a bit crazy. I'm doing it because I want to see what the app can do. And I want to go through the app and see what it does. I don't want to sort of just try it out for half a day or a week and say, oh yeah, it's really nice. You just click this button and you do this. I want to actually see what it does. And do you really get to an A2 level with a kind of a 1,200 words, which is where roughly you are with an A2 level, 1,200, 1,500 words roughly. Do you get there after you've done a month of Estonian on this app? And I think it's looking promising so far. Having done the A2 exam in Turkish and having just sat an exam that was round about an A2 level in Cornish, I feel that I'm in a position where I can actually make quite a good parallel with the language. There are definitely pros and cons with studying very quickly and intensively, and I will definitely go into that in a lot more detail when I get to the end of the course, because I really want to explore that more. And I've spoken a bit before about, I've been doing Scottish Gaelic I did it for 10 months, and I'm going to start again, not start from the beginning, but I'm going to start the course studying again. And I can say more in Estonian now after 3 weeks. I could say more after 2 weeks than I could in Scottish Gaelic after 10 months. So something weird's going on. I don't know, but I'll explore that more and let you know what I think. Jaki za vaše programy styrin. Ciekawie. Okay, dziękuję. I don't speak Ukrainian, but I can understand what you've written. Dziękuję. Es normal cometer errores básicos incluso después de haber aprendido el idioma durante muchos años. Sí, y para gente del país también, que llevan años monolingües también de español, cometen muchos fallos. Así que para una persona extranjera aprendiendo el idioma como segundo o tercer idioma, pues claro que sí, van a cometer fallos, es normal. E incluso después de un nivel bastante alto también, es normal, porque los hispanoparlantes cometen muchos fallos también. Así que forma parte de nuestra vida, ¿no? A ver, hace 20 años creyendo en gente que no pueden nuestro idioma. Vale, a ver. Richard, some languages do offer opportunities to realize new personalities. Okay, Japanese is so relational. You're forced to think differently about your interlocutors and surroundings. You act different. Yeah, Mitch, you do act differently, but your core person may change slightly. What I'm saying is, I've been living in an environment for 17 years now, where the way you communicate your ideas in Macedonian is so different to the other Indo-European languages I speak. So different. I mean, they just don't communicate in the same way. I don't know. It's a Balkan thing. I don't know if it's the Turkish influence, but you don't speak in this. You can use the same words and you can use the same grammar and think you're communicating something, but you're not. And this is, I think, what you're talking about in Japan. And Japanese is obviously even further away from this, and so would be Korean or Chinese or whatever else. But what I'm saying is, my core personality is my core personality, and that doesn't change. The way I use language might change. The way I package myself is done in a conscious way, and it's a learnt behavior, but it's not my core personality necessarily. And things I find funny, I will find funny regardless of the language I'm speaking. I mean, I can't change where I'm from, and I can't change who I am, and I can't change what makes me laugh and what makes me sad and what I do like and what I don't like. I can't change those core things very easily. They're just there, and they're all based on personal history, experiences, and all that kind of stuff. There's so much going on there, and that's what I think you don't change. Well, I don't change. I get that you feel that you act differently, though. I do get that, and you do need to. I mean, that's called cultural awareness, and there's language learning and there's cultural awareness. So, to be culturally appropriate in your new setting, sometimes you do need to adjust what's normal for you. Yeah. You act differently in Japan, Mitch. I get it, and I act differently in the Balkans than I do in the UK, for sure. But that doesn't change who I am, if that makes sense to you. So when people ask me, do I change personalities? No, I don't. Do I take on the cultural norms of another country? Absolutely. Does that make sense, that difference? I hope it makes sense. Good, Richard. Let me see. Thanks for your thoughts. You're very welcome. Wow, 28 days on Speakly, 770 words. Yeah, Derek, I'm loving your updates actually on Twitter as well. Good on you. How would you suggest I use italki? I think I've just described it now. You may have seen that since you wrote this, but I would say doing the screenshots of the words you're learning, the sentences, practicing them for pronunciation, for clarity, and then playing around with them and seeing what you can insert and change out to say things that are relevant for you. What would you say you are now? An A2 in Estonian? No, I wouldn't say I'm an A2 in Estonian right now. Right now, no. Right now, I would feel I could probably, if I were to do my Turkish exam, my A1 exam in Estonian right now, I think I'd pass. The A2 exam, possibly not. Not yet. Not yet, if I'm honest. Although when I spoke to Inga after my 2 weeks of Estonian, she said, "Oh, you're definitely like A2," and I was like, I don't know. I mean, she's a teacher, right? So I think she's got a lot more experience of a lot more different levels at each level. So for me, when I say I'm at a level, I have in mind, I know all of the information at that level. and I definitely don't yet. I mean, I don't have the number of words. I'm just shy of 1,000 words in Estonian, and I need at least 1,200 to be kind of an A2 level. So I've got this week yet to go, and that was kind of why I decided on 40 a day, because I wanted to try and get to this kind of A2 level. And I took an Estonian book that gets you to A2 level as a guide of how many words I need to learn, and they had like 1,200, 1,500 words, something like that, and that would probably be around that level, roughly. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate. Thank you. I'm glad that's really kind of you to say you appreciate my time. I really appreciate your time as well, coming to talk to me. And you're very welcome. I'm very happy to respond to the questions. If I ever miss any, always let me know. It's never ever personal. It's just my poor eyes. Sometimes I don't see. I got a question about one of my cats. How's Garfield? Yeah, Garfield's fine. He's a lazy little cat. He's very cute though. Thank you for asking. Yeah, they're very sweet. They're not with me right now here in this room, but they are very sweet and they're doing well. Como você está, Jim? Como isso? Eu não sei o que é isso. Que é isso? Que trem isso? Ok. Quais uma fala? Vários. I watched that video. You did great. But I agree, teachers at times super height someone knows. Thank you. It's really kind of you. Yeah, I think that what it is, and this is why I'm just going to explain why I think that people often overestimate or underestimate the A2 level particularly. So to pass an A2 exam in Turkish, for example, you needed to get a score of 62%, right? 62%. So you basically need to know just over half of all of the words that were in the course. It's a relatively low level, right? I mean, if you think about it, when I did my Turkish exam, well, the exams, I did A1, I did A2, and then I did B1, and I passed A1 and A2 with around 96, 97%, something like that. So almost 100%, right? So I knew pretty much everything that was in the A1 course and everything that was in the A2 course when I sat the exams, and I felt very confident doing them. And I felt very confident doing the Cornish exam as well, because I knew that I knew the words, and there weren't many words I couldn't recall. So when you know the words and you've got like 90 to 100% in an exam, and then somebody else passes the same level with 62%, there's a 30% gap. And at an A2 level, that is a huge difference. Huge difference. So sometimes someone will finish the A2 level and it will feel like they're already at this B1 level, which is why I talk about this in between. This A2 B1 level is quite a nice level to be able to go around and do what you want to do. That's why I say that, because that's kind of the level we're talking about when it's a high A2 level, right? A very, very high A2 level to a low B1 level. So when you join B1, you could probably make out and write some of the questions on a B1 exam already without studying it, but there's still a long way to go. But that's kind of where I'm coming at when I talk about this. And so for me to say A2, I feel like I'm really, like, I know A2. That's what I feel. Yeah, A2 can be looked down on, but it's a lot. It's a lot of stuff. It really is. A2's not that. It takes a lot of work. It's really not that easy. I mean, it's A2. If anyone is listening from like the UK, this is the level of your final exam when you're 16 at school in a language. Is if you do all the higher level exams, it's kind of an A2 level. What's my level of Greek? Good question. Probably around a B1-ish level. Yeah, roundabout. Let me see. It's weird because I've been speaking Greek for so long. I feel very comfortable speaking in Greek to quite, on a daily basis. It's not a big thing for me to do that. But sometimes there are kind of weird gaps in my Greek. So yeah, it's kind of this weird B1 level, I guess. I'm still building islands. It's kind of is what I want to say. Tu lingua tu como? Discount. ¿Qué es esto? Discount. Tu lingua latina discount. I was reading that as like Portuguese, thinking what's going on. I've studied a little bit of Latin, but I don't speak Latin. I quite fancy learning to speak it, actually. Do any of you speak Latin? Would you like to speak Latin? It sounds very nice when you hear it. I like it. John, you can relate to my Scots Gaelic story. 13 years of Irish in school and could barely communicate then after 6 months in the classroom with a classroom assistant in an Irish language school. Yeah, 6 months in a classroom with an assistant who speaks the language. You're fluent, absolutely, completely relate to that. That is a very common thing, I think. I'm glad you can relate. Let's see. Dr. Knowles, okay. Is there a theory about communication in blocks? Have you heard about that? Yeah, maybe similar. Is that similar to what I was talking about the islands, Flavio? Hey, Douglas, good to see you again. Some people feel different when they switch groups with their own mother tongue, and when they're you do. But this is true as well, Douglas. You're right. So this cultural thing, right? It's not just about languages, like foreign languages not from where you're from originally, languages you're learning. This can also be within your own language groups, right? So how you speak with your friends and family from home, and how you speak at a job interview, and how you're expected to behave. You don't change your personality. You tailor it and you taper it, and you conform to social norms, things that people expect you to do because you're in a different situation. And yeah, this happens in your own language and different dialects and areas, or wherever you are. It's definitely not just for languages you learn, it's for your own language too. Absolutely. As a native English speaker, are there some accents you struggle to understand? Not that I've come across yet. No, not yet. I love accents and dialects, so I've always tried to imitate them and learn them. So not really, not in English. I sometimes need to attune my ear, but no, I'm quite used to hearing very, very different types of English. I don't think a lot of people actually speak Latin. It's more about understanding text too. There are people that do speak it, actually, Dino. There are people that do learn to speak it. The pronunciation sometimes can be discussed and disputed, but there are groups of people who do learn it. There's a school, I think, or like a college in Italy where they go on courses and speak in Latin, actually speak it. And there was a teacher in the US who used to teach it for free to actually speak it. And there are courses to learn to speak Latin. So I quite fancy doing that sometime. I think it'd be a lot of fun. What's my way of learning Chinese? At the moment, I'm not studying Chinese, but I use the integrated Chinese books. Are you British? Yes. Yes. Do you think it's important to know your level? Does it help you to know where to progress? Not really. I think that so many people have so many different views on levels and where they are and what they need to do, that it almost becomes meaningless. I think for yourself, to kind of be honest with yourself, it's kind of helpful, because this is the thing, is I think sometimes it's easy to feel that you overinflate a level, for example, and it can be a dangerous road, because especially in sort of where you get, if you think that it's kind of the Dunning-Kruger effect, versus the Dunning-Kruger effect versus the imposter syndrome issue that a number of experts find themselves in. I think it's probably good to be somewhere in the middle. Yeah. You should try the accents of Ireland. Yeah, well, yeah, John, absolutely. Accents in Ireland, and even on the island of Great Britain, there are so many different accents. It's untrue. If you can read Latin, in fact, all the medieval and of course Roman culture will open and fully accessible to. Yes, it will. That's the most powerful reason to learn Latin. Yeah, Tiago, I agree. I think that there's a lot to learn from that. Thank you. I would definitely love to go in for some Latin at some point. Continue Russian. Okay. I think we should come to a close now, because we're at an hour and 6 minutes. Somebody wrote to me and said, why don't you make your videos a little bit shorter? These are too long to watch. Do you think my hour is too long? Should I be cutting these down? Let me know. Tell me if I should be cutting these down. It feels to me that an hour is just enough time to set up an idea and a conversation, and then talk to you and answer questions. It feels like the right amount of time for me personally. I enjoy the hour with you. But yeah, I did get a couple of questions about whether I can make these shorter. What do you think? Tell me what you think. I'd love to know. Maybe I should make more videos. I don't know. Tell me what you'd like. Just I'm open to it. Don't make them shorter. I love it. Okay, yeah. So it was lovely to spend this hour with you. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing you again next week to talk more. Same time, same place. And yeah, thank you so much for coming and keeping me company on this Sunday afternoon. I've very much enjoyed your company, and I will enjoy it again next week too. Take care, everyone, and happy language learning. Bye-bye.